Welcome back, and we're continuing on the X5, and in the last video, we made a lot of progress. We got this entire corner out with the entire knuckle and the entire suspension and everything. That was a lot of work, and we finally dropped the entire subframe. And one of the things that we also did in that video, we completely finished up this entire chassis leg, because if you see here, this is completely straight now, and if you look back onto the old one, it had complete dents on the corner and wasn't straight anymore. But now, as you can see, we finally got it back, and we measured it back from the corners and everything, and this seems to be straight as of right now. And as I said in the last video, we're going to be tackling this guy. We're going to be swapping this entire chassis leg out, which is going to be a lot of progress and a lot of small steps that we even have to do before we even tackle this. And the first step, which I'm going to be doing now, is to clean everything around it, and also the other side, because it is completely dirty and dusty. This is all dust because this car was in Salt Lake City, Utah, and really dusty in there. Even the complete inside was completely dusty when we got the car, because they do leave the windows open at Copart. And since we're going to be taking out this entire chassis leg and putting a new one in there, we're going to be sanding a lot, and we're going to have bare aluminum, and we're definitely going to be painting a lot of stuff. So we want this to be very clean, to make it look very nice. So yeah, that's going to be the first step, to clean everything around here. And also same on this side, clean it because it is already open. So I'm going to take this chance to clean it right now with a pressure washer. And before we even do that, another small step that I have to do is to cover all of these holes, which are for the heating and cooling for the inside and everything. And also take all of these connectors and swing them down below so those don't get any trouble with them. So yeah, I'm gonna start with that by closing off all of the holes and getting these connectors out the way. And for all of this, I'm just going to be using a little bit of blue tape to cover up all of these holes so that nothing can get inside of it. And now I got everything covered up, and I got all of these connectors out of the way, and they shouldn't be a problem now anymore. And always double and triple check everything to make sure that you have everything covered, because you don't want to make any more damages than there already are. But yeah, I'm gonna get the pressure washer in here and start by going over everything from a far distance. Obviously you don't want to get too close, otherwise you are gonna go through the blue tape and may cut into some hoses or connectors. You definitely don't want that happening. So just keep your distance, and I'll try to get most of the dirt off. And obviously I'm not going to be able to remove everything with the pressure washer, just to get some of the rough stuff off. And after, I'm going to go in there with detail and get everything super clean. And yeah, I'm going to get the pressure washer in now. So now we just have everything with the pressure washer, and the chassis leg itself already looks way better, because I actually went up close to the chassis leg, because this is kind of what is the most important right now, because this is what we're trying to do right now and what we need the cleanest. And everything else on top of here, I didn't really go too close, and stuff like this is really hard to get off because it's been on here for so long. Now I'm going to be moving on to the new one. This one is already pretty clean, definitely a lot cleaner than the one that is on the X5 right now. But I am just going to spray it down a little bit. There's a couple spider webs and just a little bit of dirt on it. So yeah, now we're going to get the pressure washer and hit this a couple of times. And since we primarily need the entire chassis leg, they have a heat shield right here, which I'm going to be removing so that I can get behind there and also clean it. And we now got the new chassis leg completely clean. This thing is super clean now. And you're maybe wondering what this cardboard piece was, and it is up here from the glass, because they did just cut completely through the glass and everything. It's just over there that they gave it to us to kind of protect it. And it's also kind of crazy to see of how many layers there are from the outside to the inside. Kind of crazy to see. I've never seen this myself. Now we got this thing clean. It's the next day and everything's dried up now. Still a little bit dirty, but that's fine. And now we can finally move on to the next step, which is going to be the first step of actually removing this entire chassis leg. And it is going to be to remove this entire seam sealer, which goes around the entire chassis leg. There's a lot of points. For example, up here, we really took a little bit off to try it out a little bit, because we obviously have never done anything like this before. So as you can see here, we have rivets up here. Same thing back here, and down here are these flow drill screws, and there's a lot along the entire chassis leg back here, and we're gonna have to take all of the seam sealer off. And the same thing on the other side of the chassis leg, a lot of seam sealer across this entire chassis leg, and also for the support frame here in the front, we have seam sealer here across these 4 screws. And then also on the bottom of this chassis leg, there are 4 screws, I believe, and we also have to take that off. So what we're using to take the entire seam sealer off is a wheel brush up here, and this actually works pretty well. As you can see, when we tried it out up here, takes off everything pretty good, and also down here on the screw, takes everything around it off pretty well. And yeah, I'm gonna get started on that now. And I really need to be careful of how much I'm gonna be taking off. For example, on these rivets up here, we're not gonna take off any more than this because we have to drill these out, because we wanna keep the OEM line of the seam sealer up here so that we know that we put the right amount and don't put too much or not too much when we put the new chassis leg in. So now after doing that for a little bit, I now uncovered these 6 screws up here, and this already looks way better. We can see all of the screws, and also back here we can see where the actual chassis overlaps to the chassis leg. For example, over here, this little corner, and also down here, it goes all the way over here, and the chassis leg kind of just slides on top, and this entire thing down here is a little like U shape. And yeah, that's essentially where the chassis leg slides into place, and then they screw these into here, and also use a lot of panel bond in there. And doing all of this is definitely a messy job. As you can see, all this stuff is from the seam sealer, everything that gets rubbed off. A lot of stuff went into the exhaust down here, as you can see. But yeah, definitely a dirty and messy job, but it needs to be done. And next up, I'm going to be doing the other side of the strut tower. This side we already uncovered the rivets, and now I'm going to do the other side for the other 3 rivets. So on the other side, I'm going to be starting off with the support frame right here, and it has 4 screws right here and also panel bond behind here. So I'm going to be taking off the seam sealer right here above the screws. Alright, and as you can see, I made a lot of progress. I worked on all of the strut tower screws and also from the support frame right here. And what I also just did after uncovering all the screws, also did all the edges to see where the strut tower actually ends. And as you can see, this is all panel bond, and also up here you can see all the panel bond squeezing through here, and this is really hard. And yeah, made a lot of progress. All of here and also all of these edges. And now the only thing that is left is this entire edge through here, and then also the bottom piece. I just completely finished the part which you guys saw last, and there's 1 or 2 corners which I couldn't really get to because they're really tight. Here's what it looks like now. I got this entire corner done, got all of the screws out. This is the corner up here where I couldn't really get the entire screw, but that's not a big problem. Got all these screws out on the bottom right here, and yeah, as you guys already saw, the strut tower up here, the support frame back here, and also on the bottom, finished up the entire corner down here, and also those 2 screws right here. And here on the other side, I also just touched up these corners back here so that the edges are completely free and we know where it ends. And then yeah, this part down here, everything which connects to the bottom, as you can see right here. And then yeah, everything else completely free. All these screws, the edges up to here and all the way over here. And yeah, that took me about 2 to 3 hours just for this. It didn't really look like much, but this definitely takes a lot of time and gets everything messy. And yeah, super happy that I finally got this done. So we got everything done on the old chassis leg, and now we have to do the exact same thing on the new one. Because obviously, as you may have seen in our last video, we didn't just get the chassis leg, we got an entire structural cut. with the chassis leg and everything, and this is still attached. So we're gonna have to do the same procedure as with the old chassis leg. Also gonna have to take all of the seam sealer off across here, and also a couple other parts like this small bracket that we have to take off so that I can get to this seam sealer. And it's the exact same for the other side, also the seam sealer across everywhere. And this is gonna be a little bit harder because this entire structural cut and the chassis leg and everything sits way lower than the X5 because the X5 is in the air right now. And this sits also on a pallet a little bit deeper. So this is gonna be a little bit harder to reach and do, but this is definitely possible. So first we're gonna start off by removing this bracket. So first I'm gonna be doing the rivets on the strut tower. So I just finished up with these two pieces on the strut tower, and this definitely went a little bit faster because after doing it a little bit on the entire chassis leg on our X5, it is definitely faster now. Now I'm going to continue down here on the chassis leg. And as you can see, I got all of these screws out, and I also discovered two new screws right here, and also dug those up on the old chassis leg. Got all of the edges out and everything, all these screws, and also the edges up here. Got everything out. And yeah, as I also said before, the strut tower, these two parts, and I'm gonna head to the other side and start with these three pieces with the strut tower, then the support frame, and then last but not least, the little part right here which holds the entire chassis leg itself. And yeah, let's get started. All right, made a lot more progress. Got the entire strut tower, these three pieces done. Got all of these screws and the edges completely cleared up. And also the support frame is also completely cleared up. And now I can move on to this entire corner. So we just flipped the entire structural cut onto its side because I do need to reach these two bottom screws right here. And yeah, I'm gonna do these now. So we just completely finished up with taking the entire seam sealer off of every screw and rivet, and also underneath here these two screws and all of the edges as well. Finished those up. This side I already did. So everything here is finished up and looks really good. And another good part about buying structural cuts is that it also comes with a couple other parts that you may need. For example, this little holder, this plastic part, which just unclips right here. Because this part is completely fine, and on the other car, the little clip is broken off on this side, and it is holding the electrical plug and just screwed in there. So this also saves a little bit of money, just a small plastic piece, but better than nothing. And now after taking all these seam sealer off, we now obviously have all these screws. And if you look at the screws, it kind of looks like that the entire head is kind of already twisted, but the screws actually don't come twisted like this. They are optimized because the car is obviously produced by a robot, and the robot already spins with the entire screw, and the screw just goes in there and the robot just twists over it. It's kind of hard to explain, but they're optimized for the robot, so it goes way faster. So the robot just spins over it and kind of either turns it or kind of chips it off a little bit. So that's why it is like that. And it is a little bit harder to take out like this, and they are really flat. So we have this socket here which goes on it and fits good, but the only thing that we have on the socket is that it's kind of slanted down, and since the screw is very thin, we can't really have that. And what we're going to do now so that this can fit on it perfectly is we're going to grind off the top piece, which is kind of slanted down, so that I can go on. And since the screw is optimized, we now have to optimize our tools. And now after grinding off the socket, we're gonna let it cool off for a little bit since it's hot. And now we're gonna work with the rivets. And the first step is to drill off the head of it, and we're gonna drill through it, and then it should start spinning with it, which means that it's loosened from the other part of the rivet. And then we should be able to punch out the rest of the rivet on the other side. So we finally got all 6 rivets out, and this definitely took way longer than expected because the head of the rivet is aluminum, but the entire pin and the back of it is made out of steel, which makes it way harder to drill through it. And this is one of the replacement rivets, and they are made out of 2 pieces. The entire pin is steel and the back itself too, and then the head is also aluminum. And when we drilled it, we had to go through every single drill from small to the biggest because you couldn't just take the biggest and go through it completely. We could do it with the first 2, but after that we completely messed up the drill and it was not sharp anymore. So we had to start with the smallest and go all the way to the biggest, so that's why it took the longest. And now we can start with the screws, and hopefully this is going to be a little bit easier. And here we now have the socket, which we grinded off so that we don't have that little slanted piece and that is completely flat. And here you can see we now got all of them out. I was kind of surprised because this worked way better than I thought. Yeah, now we got all these screws out, and these are all reusable. So yeah, I'm gonna head on to the other side and get all of these out. So now we finally got all of the screws out, and not a single one of them broke or tore off, and we got all of them out completely. And the only thing holding this entire chassis leg on should be the panel bond. What we're going to do now is kind of take this little scraper, which is usually a construction tool, and heat it up and try to get it between the strut tower, for example, right here, and the chassis leg itself, and heat it up and kind of go in between there, hammer it in, kind of use it as a little chisel, and then we'll see if we can get it off. And now before we head to the other spots, we're just cleaning them up a little bit so that we don't have too much of the seam sealer on it, because as you saw at the top, it is definitely a little bit crusty and gets hot. And as you also saw, it smokes a little bit, and it's definitely not that healthy because it's just plastic and also just some random chemicals. So it's not that healthy. So that's why we're cleaning up a little bit so we don't have that much. And yeah, we're gonna head on to the other spots. So now we also just took off the entire seam sealer off of the chassis itself right here, and then we also discovered 2 more spots and one on the top right here. Not too sure what it is, if it's just pressed together or if it's a sort of rivet. We're not too sure right now, but right now we're gonna do the same thing like we did with the other pieces. Is we're gonna go through here, heat it up, and try to soften the panel bond, and then after that we're gonna try to go through here with this and try to pry it off a little bit. The bad thing is that it's steel, but the good thing is that it's a little bit thinner than the rest. So now we've finally loosened everything up. For example, this whole part and the exact same part on the other side. And the next step is to get these sort of rivets out right here. There's 2 on this side and 1 up here. We have to drill those out. And then after drilling these out, we can go in between there with the little scraper and also loosen up the panel bond. And after that, everything should be disconnected and not connected to the chassis leg anymore. There will be a couple spots, for example, like corners like these that we can't really get to, that will be connected still with the panel bond, but we're gonna get those out. And now we finally got these 2 rivets out, and this one is a little bit hard to get to because there's not a lot of space in between here to get there with the right drill. But then we also got the angle grinder and kind of got a little bit away, but the full rivet is not out yet. So what we're gonna do now is, since this entire piece is already loose from the panel bond, we're gonna cut across here on the bottom, because we think right now, because we had a little camera and held it in here, that the chassis leg itself stops at about right here, at the level right here. So what we're gonna do is cut into here so that we can also take this piece, bend it around, and then take this piece, which is still connected with panel bond, and fold this off. And then after this is folded off, we can also fold this around, and this just gives a little bit more space and makes the entire thing a little bit more easy. Yeah, we're gonna start by cutting into here now. And obviously we can't cut into this piece because we don't actually need this. This is not part of the chassis leg. This is the chassis leg, and we can do it on the structural cut because we don't need this part. Obviously we can't do that on the X5, so that's gonna be a little bit harder, but we're gonna also cut into here to make it a little bit easier to fold this around. So we definitely got it bent a little bit, but now we're gonna go in there with the scraper again and with a little bit of heat to get the rest of the panel bond, because we think that there's still a little bit panel bond right here. So that's what we're gonna do now. So a quick update, made a good amount of progress. Got this entire piece bent down and also got this entire piece disconnected. And also, as you just saw, cut into here with the angle grinder and got this bent more, and also this, because the problem that we had before is that this scraper wouldn't really fit in here. So then we went in between there, got it loose, and now we should be able to go in between with the scraper and get all of the panel bond off. So now after loosening that side, we now came to a conclusion that it's a little bit easier if we kind of cut into the entire structural cut. So we're gonna keep the strut tower, and obviously we need that support frame, so we're not gonna touch that with the angle grinder and cut it. So we're gonna cut through this entire piece. So we're just kind of gonna cut straight through here so we can get this entire piece off, because all of this obviously is loose, but it's kind of clamping everything together, and we can't really move the entire chassis legs so that we can pull it out. So that's what I'm gonna do now, cut it completely so we can remove this top piece so that we have a little bit of more room to play with. So now after doing a little bit of the cutting and playing with the chassis leg, we noticed that it is already pretty loose, and yeah, we're gonna probably attempt to get this out now. And the only piece that is kind of held on, as you can see down here, when we move the chassis leg, this wall is still connected to it, so we're gonna go in there with the scraper again and with a little bit of heat to get the panel bond off. Now I also just saw, after we tried to get it loose with this, we kind of thought that it was this piece, but we saw that it was welded on, so it also couldn't be this attached to it, because the scraper is also going behind it. And then I looked a little closer, and then I saw this little rivet down here, and this is kind of what's blocking us right now. So we're gonna drill through it, and then hopefully that should be it. And now after doing a little bit more drilling and prying on the chassis leg itself, we definitely got this rivet completely out and it's loose. But then after checking it and moving it a little bit more, we noticed that the entire chassis was still connected to the chassis leg at one point, and we're kind of looking around, kind of confused. And then we took off a little bit more seam sealer, and then we sadly found another rivet, but hopefully this time this should be the last one. And now we can see that when I move the chassis leg, that the bottom piece is not attached anymore, so that's a good sign. And now it should be completely loose. And now we have the exact same thing. After discovering this rivet and drilling it completely through, and it's not connected anymore, we were still, again, trying to get this entire chassis leg out again, It was not budging and trying to get out at all. And so we have the theory that there's one more hidden rivet in there, and as you can see, there definitely is one down there all the way in the corner, which we did not see because of the seam sealer again. And yeah, hopefully now this is the last one. So now we finally got that rivet out, and hopefully this is the last one and we can take the chassis leg out. And there we have it, one entire chassis leg removed. This definitely took a lot of time, and there was some secrets, as you just saw, with the entire rivets. But yeah, super excited that we finally got this out, and I'm super happy that we finally got this entire chassis leg out. This definitely was a huge learning curve and a bit of a struggle, but we finally managed to do it, and now we kind of know where all the screws and rivets are for the other chassis leg that we have to do. And also kind of happy that we did end up buying a structural cut, because you can kind of experiment around with it, obviously not damaging the chassis leg itself, because that's essentially the part that we need at the end. Yeah, this kind of helped us experiment a little bit around to see where the panel bond sits, where the screws are, and especially the rivets at the end. I definitely recommend this to you guys if you've never done anything like this like we did, to maybe go for a structural cut and not straight for a chassis leg to do it the first time on the car itself, because you don't want any damage on it. For this, we didn't want to damage the chassis leg, but we could damage the chassis itself right here. We cut into it and everything to make life a little bit easier, because we don't need it, just the chassis leg. But on the X5 right here, this is a complete different story, because for that, we don't really care about the chassis leg, because obviously it's bent and broken. Because here, the chassis of the car itself is in a good condition, and we don't want to touch that at all. The only thing that we can also cut into to make life a little bit easier is the chassis leg itself, because we're gonna cut into here and take it out kind of piece by piece. But we'll see when we get there. Hopefully this is gonna be a little bit easier, because we already know how to do it and know where the screws and the rivets are again. But that's something for tomorrow, and this is gonna be a whole new challenge, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. All right, so now as you can see, we have the new subframe in here, and we have it in here right now to double check everything, because as you may know, when we had the old subframe in here, this chassis leg was pulled to this side a little bit by a couple of millimeters and was not in its place. And as I've mentioned, that was due to the subframe, because the subframe did have damage, so that's why we have a new one. As you can see back here, this is now straight and not bent completely. And so what we did now is we put it under and put all the screws in. We don't have the screws in right now, but everything lines up, as you can see back here on this chassis leg, and also those 2 points back here. So the only thing that doesn't align obviously is this front piece right here, because obviously it is completely bent. And what we did to double check it is we took measurements from the back to the front right here, and also did the same thing on the other side, because for stuff like this, to measure it, you don't actually need the picture with all the measurements or the official measurements, because with stuff like this, you can just compare the left side to the right side, because the car obviously should be symmetrical. So as I've said, what we did went from the back to the front, and the same thing on the other side. And then we also went diagonally from that corner to this corner, and from that corner to that corner down there. And what we noticed then is that if you go from the top there to the bottom right here, is a little bit shorter than from this corner to that top corner, but that is due to this entire thing sitting a little bit lower, because this piece is not completely in this chassis leg. So this will sit a little bit lower, but once it sits where it should be, the left and the right side will match up. So this is really, really good news. And yeah, we just want to double check it before we actually take the old one out and just slide the new one in. And then that one is still not right. So yeah, always double check it before you take it out and mess it up even more. And now after double checking the other chassis leg, we can now finally continue on this one and start by taking it out. And what we're gonna start off with is to take out all the screws, which works really, really well. And then also drill out all the rivets. And we obviously now know where all of them are, and some of them were hidden, but now we luckily know where they are. And then after that, we're gonna slowly start working from the front to the back. For example, take this front piece off with the panel bond and everything, and then cut it off, and then the next piece, cut it off. And that's kind of the plan, but we'll see when we get there. Now we got all the screws out, now we can move on to the rivets. But before we actually get to drilling, we still have to take off a little bit more seam sealer on this side and the same on the other side. And here's the other side, the 3 rivets that we also found last time on the other structural cut of the chassis leg. Now we can get to the drilling part. So now we just went through every rivet with a small drill, and we're gonna go with a bigger size every time until they're loosened up and they're not on there anymore. So now we finally got all the screws and rivets out completely. As you can see up here, everything is completely drilled out, and the screws, as you also saw before, these 3 rivets on this side. And what I also did in the meantime, whilst my dad was drilling those out, I cleaned up these edges on the chassis leg itself so that we can go in between there with the scraper later, because we are going to heat up the chassis leg, but not this part of the chassis like we did on the other piece, because this is what we're going to keep, and the chassis leg, it doesn't really matter. So that's also why we're going to cut it, so that we can also reach the inside spots of the chassis leg and heat it up without touching the outside of the good chassis. And also exact same thing on the other side. Also got these 3 rivets out on the back side, and also all the screws, and also cleaned up all these edges so that we can go in between there. Now we can go ahead and continue with loosening the panel bond. So now we're going to start off with this support frame right here, and as I said, we're going to cut. So the first cut that we're going to do through the entire chassis leg will be around here, and then we're going to start loosening this so that we can already take it off. And then after that, we're going to make a cut around, maybe around here, kind of diagonally down here. Keep this hole so in case we need to move it or pull it out, we still have this hole and can maybe feed something through to pull it out. Yeah, let's start off with this front piece. So as you just saw, we cut off that one part of the chassis leg, and also cut through this part of the attachment of the support frame right here, because first, we don't need it, and second of all, it was already kind of smushed together, and we couldn't really get the scraper that we used in between there to loosen up the panel bond. Again, since we don't need it, we just decided to cut through it. Here you can see what the inside looks like, and that's also one of the reasons, but the smaller reasons, why we didn't end up trying to fix this chassis leg, because first of all, the biggest reason is that this is definitely not really savable, and you will always see remains. And plus, the inside, this structure, if you pull it out, this will also be a little bit weakened and also crooked on the inside. You will never get this completely straight on the inside because you can't really reach it. So that's also one other point to why we didn't try to save this one. But yeah, we're gonna move on now. And now for the second part of the chassis leg, which is going to be this part where the strut tower is attached to. We just made the next cut, which goes down here, across here, and down here, and then continues down here and goes straight up and goes to the other side. Now we're going to continue with the panel bond. So now we finally got this second piece of the chassis leg out. We had some issues of getting this panel bond on this center piece right here for the strut tower. Had a couple of issues getting this off, and then also cutting it, because at the front we saw that there's 2 pieces. We thought that it just continues straight through there with 2 pieces, but in the back it connects, and we didn't know that at first. So then we had to cut straight through it, and now finally got it off. And here you can see this is what it looks like from the outside. We now got it completely cut off right here. As I mentioned, this was the piece that we had the issues on of getting off, because it was sitting at a weird angle, so that was kind of hard to get out. And this is also off, as you can see back here. Now we're going to move on to this piece. So now we finally got everything disconnected from the panel bond, everything on this side, and also everything on this side, and only as far as we can go, because the scrapers obviously can't go around the round edges, and that's the only thing that's kind of holding it back, because we can't go in between there. So everything that's rounded, like these edges also on the bottom right here, we can't really get in between there, so that's kind of holding it back. And all the way at the end of the chassis leg on the bottom, there's one little spot of panel bond that's still attached, and we can't really get into there because it's all the way back here on the bottom. So if we would have a frame machine, we could probably already take it out, but as of right now, it's already a little bit loose and wobbling around a little bit, so we're gonna wiggle it around and see if we can get it out. So as you just saw, it is definitely loose and moves up and down, but the problem that we're having right now is that it won't really make any moves to the front and out, and we can't really pull it just like this. So what we're gonna do now, and little disclaimer, we're not showing you how you should do it. This is how we're just gonna do it for right now, and this is on our own risk and everything, so I do not recommend doing this. This is just how we're gonna do it right now because we don't really have any other solution. And what we're gonna do is open the garage door, put our truck outside, and tie it to the chassis leg. We're probably gonna feed it through this hole right here and tie it to the truck. We're not gonna attach it and rip it out. We're just gonna put a little bit of tension on it so that when we move it a little bit, that it starts moving out, because as I said, we don't really have anything where we can pull and try to get it out. So what we're gonna do, as I said, take the truck outside and tie it to the chassis leg. So as I said, this is on our own risk. Don't try this at home, and let's try to get this chassis leg out. So here's your solution, not a pro version, but a improvised version, and this will definitely work. And as you can see, we have it hooked up here and have it here with the tie down, and there's tension on here. Also have it back here on the chassis leg. So what we're gonna do now is, since we have tension on there, hit it a couple more times and then see if it budges out. Now we finally have the last and final piece out of the broken chassis leg. This definitely was a bit of a struggle. And here's that little spot of the panel bond, which I was talking about in the back that we couldn't reach, but we finally got it out. And here's the back piece of the chassis of the car. You can see that this is where the chassis leg ends. And also this entire side is full of panel bond, and it's not just that they put a small amount of panel bond, they put everything full of panel bond. And then, yeah, again, this small piece back here which we can't reach. And then all of these edges, everything full of panel bond. But finally got it out, and now we can move on to the new one. And when we put the new chassis leg in, there's a order on which screws and everything we put in first. When we slide the chassis leg in and have it in its place, we put this side first because this is the base, which sits completely straight, which is also why we don't really bend it out. When we have the new chassis leg in, we put all of these screws and rivets back here into place first. Then we move on to the top piece right here. And then finally we do this piece, because this piece we could actually bend out a little bit because it also goes over this and bends into here. Kind of hard to explain. But this is the last piece that we do, and then it just gets screwed into place. And that's kind of the order that we're gonna have to go with. So we also have to do the exact same thing for the chassis leg, so that's what I'm gonna do now too. So as you can see, I got all of these spots done right here. There was a lot of panel bond on each and single one of them, and we still have to do this entire corner and the back side of it. And now it's all clean. Every side is completely cleaned out, and there's no more panel bond on there, and now we can test fit it. So as I said, we're gonna go and test fit it. We're gonna slide it in, but after we're gonna take it out again. This is just to get measurements and see if everything sits right, so that we know if everything is right or if anything has to move. If when we slide this in, we're gonna also put the crash bar that we have slide it into place so that we know that they're the right distance from each other. And we also know that this support frame is not the right distance, so that we can also see how far and close it needs to be, because we also are going to be pulling this over here so that it sits at the right place. Alright, so we just slid the chassis leg in place, and after that we also slid the entire crash bar in place and also mounted it with the screws. And looking at it, it looks very, very good. And we also took multiple measurements from corner to corner, diagonally, and also side to side, and everything looked really, really good. So that's super exciting and a good fact. And now after doing all that, we can now take it back out. We're gonna take the crash bar out and also the chassis leg, because this was just to test everything, to double check it and everything. And we also need to take it out again because we need to pull this support frame more over here, because obviously, as you can see, this was cut off, but this is way too far to the left, so we're gonna have to pull that again. And in the back, we didn't take the panel bond off yet, so that's something that we also have to do, and that's what we're gonna start off doing now. So actually, before we start taking the crash bar and the chassis leg back out, we thought that we triple check it and are rather safe than sorry, and we're gonna put the new subframe underneath again to also double check all the points again. So that's what we're gonna do now before we actually take it out again. And now the subframe is in place. Everything is sitting where it should be. It's slotted in right there. And also down here, these hangers back here also line up very good, as you can see, and all the other points. So that's a very, very good sign. And obviously, we're not just gonna look at the subframe. We also took some measurements and also compared it from side to side to also get heights to see where the chassis legs actually sit, which is also why we put up our laser right here, which sets everything level. As you can see, we have the horizontal line. It's a little hard to see, but you can see it here, right here. So what we did, we took different points on the chassis leg from the front to the middle and to the back, and compared it from the left to the right side, and they were the exact same and constant from the front to the back. Let's say I take the front right here, and this would be in centimeters 40.8, and on the other side, this is also 40.8, as you can see. So that matches up, and we did the same thing across the entire chassis leg from the front to the back. So we know that this is level, which is a really, really good sign, which means that we don't have to do anything and that this chassis leg is in the right place. So what we're gonna do now is already drill the holes for the rivets, because they're not the right size just yet, because we also, like we just did, wanted to put the chassis leg in the right position and then drill it so everything lines up. And one more thing that we did to get the exact height of the chassis leg, we have these window shims, which are for glazing the windows, because as I said in the last video, my dad works in a business with windows and aluminum windows, so we know a little bit about it. And these are window shims. The blue are 2 millimeters and the red are each 3 millimeters, which is a total of 10 millimeters, which is 1 centimeter. And we measured that off of the old chassis leg before we actually took it out, and this now shows that this is the right measurement. And as we also know, the chassis leg is in the right place. So let's get to drilling. So now first up, I'm going to be drilling out the rivets, which are still stuck in the chassis leg, because not all of them got out. There's still a couple that are still in there. So I'm going to take a small drill and drill all of those rivets out. And after that, I'm going to be drilling a bigger hole for the repaired rivets, which we got from BMW. So we just drilled all the rivets out and also made the bigger holes for the new rivets that we have. As you can see, we already put the new rivets in there to kind of show to you guys, so you get a better idea back here too. These 3 rivets down here, as you can see. And one thing that we were thinking about and weren't too sure on are the screws, because as you can see, some screw holes are good and some of them are off center, like the one on the top right here. And we weren't really too sure if we just take these screws and just screw them in there, but then we were kind of scared that there would be some kind of tension on the strut tower, and then the strut tower might tear or even break, and we definitely don't want that. So we weren't really too sure what we should do. And there's 3 different ways that we can do this. The first option is that we just put the screws in and hope for the best, which we definitely don't want, so that's off the list. And the second option is that we drill through all the holes and just put rivets in there. But since we do want the car to turn out as OEM as possible, we also don't really want to do that, so we can scratch that off the list. And option number 3 is that we take this chassis leg to Diego and he fills the holes in so that they're completely closed and that there's no old holes in there. And then afterwards, when we put the chassis leg back in, and then these screws can make their own fresh new thread again, which would be the better option. So that's what we're gonna do. Since we now have all the holes and everything, we can now take the chassis leg and crash bar and everything back out, since we have everything. And then we're gonna take this crash bar, give it to Diego. He's gonna fill out all the holes so that we have fresh and new holes for the new screws. So before we actually take everything apart, one thing that I still wanna do is try to get this entire support frame and this top section in its right position. And we have the laser set up so we can also measure this top right here. On the top right here is 1 centimeter, and on the other side it is around 1.1 or 1.2, which is just 1 or 2 millimeters, but we're gonna fix this now. And also the deformation up here, because this entire piece should be similar to a rectangle, but right now it doesn't really look that much like a rectangle like on this side. But we're gonna try to fix this, hit it a couple times. So the plan for right now is to hit this down and then this up and also this into its right position, but we'll see when we start now. So we're gonna hit it a couple times and then also start measuring it again so that we don't go over it. And as you can see, it's still around 1.1, so that means we're still gonna have to hit it a couple times. And now it's around 1, which is okay, and now we're gonna move on. So now after hitting it a couple of times here and there, it now looks a little bit better. The top piece is now flat, but definitely doesn't look like what it should look like on this side. And we're not gonna stop until it looks like the other side, but definitely looks way better than before. So what we're gonna do now is take out this support frame, because we're gonna swap it out anyways. And it is riveted in here with 4 rivets and back here with 3, and also a little bit of panel bond. So nothing new. This should be a easy job to take this one out. And there's a couple of reasons why we have to take it out. One of them being that the support frame already was a little bit bent. Then we already cut it, so we can't use it anymore. We also are taking it out because it is kind of supporting this bottom piece since it is riveted onto it. So we can't really get it straight, so that's why we also have to take it out so that we can bend this bottom piece straight again. So we just disassembled everything. Now we can move on down here to this part of the chassis, which we didn't do at the start because it is steel and we didn't want to touch it at first because we're going to remove all this panel bond which is still on here with the wheel brush, and the wheel brush will scrape into it. And if we leave it open like that for a couple of days or maybe even hours, it will start to rust, and we definitely don't want that. So what we're going to do now is take the wheel brush, remove all the panel bond, sand it down, and then hit it with primer so it is protected and it won't rust. So we just completely cleaned this part of the chassis, and we're going to hit it with a thin layer of the primer. And once we get to the actual step in the future when we apply the panel bond, we're going to sand it down a little bit again so that the panel bond actually sticks. And yeah, let's hit it with the primer. Just got the primer completely done, and this already looks way better than before because it's all one color and just looks way better. Also, this entire thing was like kind of black and burned because we obviously had to heat it up. So this looks way better now, and yeah, really happy with how it turned out. So a little change in our game plan, because as you may remember, I said that we're gonna give this chassis leg to Diego because most of the holes didn't really align very well to the other holes in the new chassis leg. But now after a little bit thinking, and we kind of came to the conclusion that there are these small like little plates under here, and you can kind of turn them when they're loose, when there's no seam seal on it, and that kind of aligns the hole because they are not really screwed in the middle perfectly. So you can kind of turn around and align them with the holes. So that problem is now solved, and it's way easier than going to Diego, him filling it up, and then after that we have to drill the new holes. So that problem is solved now, and now we can move on to the support frame. We're gonna drill it out, all the rivets that are in there on the top, and then also take the one out which is in the structural cut, also the same part. Then we should be able to get this thing similar to this one, because this one is a square and this one obviously not that much. So yeah, we're gonna get the support frame out and try to see if we can get this completely straight, hold the new one on so that we can see where it is down here on the chassis leg, and if we need to move it a little bit more. So yeah, let's get started. And now after a little bit of drilling and wiggling this entire piece around, we finally got it out. And it's a little bit annoying to get this entire thing out because one, the the rivets start to spin after a little bit after you drill through it, and the second is that the rivets are steel, and once you are in there with the drill and drill in for a little bit, the drill isn't as sharp anymore in the front. You have to constantly switch them. So we also had to buy 2 multi-packs, which is kind of annoying. So this took very long and longer than expected, but we finally got it off, and here you can also see that these are the plates where it was under and that it was definitely bent. This side is even worse. And now we have panel bond under here, which we have to remove, which is pretty easy. This side, which was on here like this side up here was already loose. We didn't even have to heat anything up. We could just pull it off. This was completely loose, was just with the rivets. And we also got the other piece off from the structural cut. It is in a way better condition. As you can see, these connectors up here are completely flat and smooth. Yeah, this thing is perfectly fine. And one thing that we did notice is that we weren't too sure if the holes will align with this piece up here, because this is where this bracket sits onto. But then we did realize that these come from each other and that these were already connected ones, so these holes will definitely align 100%. So that's nothing to worry about. And yeah, now we're gonna get to this part up here, and this is now a little bit easier to bend down here because it doesn't have the other plate, which kind of makes it a little bit stronger. So now we can hammer it a little bit more and try to get it as good as possible. And now we finally got this piece back to complete normal. As you can see, the shape and everything looks very good compared to the one that didn't have any damages. It looks very good. Also, we measured the heights and everything, and those were also really good, which was very surprising. Very lucky that everything was still sitting good. Yeah, now we can finally move on to the very big step, which I'm excited for, that we are now putting the new chassis leg in here. Here we have the new chassis leg. And what we're gonna do now to kind of prepare everything, we have open spots here with the aluminum, and what aluminum has, after a very short period of time, it builds a very small corrosion layer, which you can't see or anything, and it kind of weakens the panel bond and how much it holds and sticks to it. So what we're gonna do now is sand it down a little bit on every single spot down here, and then also clean it with our special aluminum cleaner, and then we can already apply panel bond and then hopefully slide it in. But first off, we're gonna start by preparing this chassis leg. So before we actually clean the chassis leg, we just want to double check it again and test fit everything, and put also the support frame, everything in here. And also this top piece sits very well and even, so that's very good. And now we can take everything off and then continue by cleaning the chassis leg. As I said, we're gonna sand it down and then clean it with our special aluminum cleaner. And then we can already finally move on to the big step, which is gonna be the panel bond, and probably a little bit stress in there because we've never done it, and obviously it's glue. So yeah, we're gonna take the chassis leg out and then try to clean it. And when we were test fitting it, we already put the screws in here about halfway, and they work really fine. So that's a good point. So now we can take it out. And we also can't forget about the panel bond, which was underneath the support frame right here. And now we can start by applying the panel bond. So now we have everything in place, all the panel bond, all the rivets, and all the screws. This entire situation was a little bit stressful. I didn't quite get all of the footage, but here is what it looks like right now after doing everything. And you can see that the panel bond is flowing out of everything, which is what you want to see, which also means that you put enough panel bond, because if it doesn't come out, that definitely means that you don't have enough. And yeah, all the screws went in very, very nice. And also all the rivets as well. Those are very easy to get in. And yeah, definitely looks very good. And I'm super happy that we finally got this in. So next up, we're just gonna clean up a little bit. For example, around here, stuff that we need, and also parts that won't get covered by panel bond, because everything like this will be underneath panel bond and won't really do anything. So that's what we're gonna do right now. And yeah, we finally got this chassis leg in. This is a huge milestone, and I'm extremely happy that we finally got it in. And it definitely required some time, because we can't just take it out and throw it back in. And we also have never done anything as far as this on a car before, especially also removing the entire engine. That was our first time doing it, and especially structural parts on a car. Have never touched any of those, so this is also very, very good, and super excited how it turned out. Yeah, this definitely took some time, and also sorry that we didn't have any videos for the last 2 weeks. This took some time, and also had a couple of days and weeks in there for a break for family and business reasons. But we finally got this video done, and this video is also definitely a little bit longer, because this also took longer, this entire process. But yeah, as I've said, extremely happy. We can't put the seam sealer on yet because the panel bond needs to dry. It's still sticky, and it has that sticky texture for 4 hours, and it needs to completely dry out for 24+ hours, which kind of makes sense because it gets really, really hard and needs to obviously hold a lot. Yeah, this is where we're gonna end the video. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. Make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on the post notification. Drive safe and stay tuned.